Okay, everyone. I wanted to mention at the beginning, and I'll say this at the end, if you have questions and we don't have time for them, Christine will send them to me and I will make videos and put them on my social media so that you can see them. So if you have questions, just put them in the chat and for sure you will get an answer. But you'll have to follow me on socials and she'll share them and I'll share them and we'll just make sure you get them. Okay, I want to talk about top 10 security tips for APIs. So I am more of on the defense than the offense side. So let's get into it. So what are we going to talk about today? APIs, how to make them more secure. That's literally it. That's all I'm going to talk about. So you're like, who is this lady? So I'm Tanya Janca. I am staff level developer relations. I did not know there was a level above principal. I thought senior was it when I was younger. Anyway, I'm very excited. I'm also known as SheHacksPurple, and yes, I wear a lot of purple. I wrote 2 books, and I'm very excited about both of them. I've worked in tech a very long time. It's kind of the only thing I'm good at. I started some things. I give some advice, and I do some research. And I'm hoping that this slide impressed you enough. That's why we do these slides as speakers. We're like, gosh, I hope I can get them to sit through my talk. So hopefully you're like, she seems tolerable. So let's do this. So first of all, I lied. There aren't 10. I'm going to give you more than 10. I'm not going to stop, right? I'm not going to like not give you a whole bunch. I actually do like full day trainings on API security. So I was like, oh, I only have that much time. Oh, I'll just cram in as much as I can. But there's so much to say on this topic. So there's way more than 10 things. Sorry, not sorry. Okay. So, oh, wait. So first of all, the problem. So APIs, as you have seen from all the amazing presentations before mine, they need protection. You would not be at this conference if you didn't understand that, right? So thank you for being here, because that's kind of like your first step, is like to expand your knowledge and know what to do. And so like they need just as much security as a regular web app. Just because they don't have a front end, as you have seen, does not make them even remotely invisible. And a lot of developers believe that they're invisible. They're like, oh yeah, like when you say public APIs, like just because you can get to them from the internet, I'm like, yeah, that's public. Web apps are the #1 cause of data breach, according to the Verizon Breach Report, which they've released every year since 2008. And we've been #1 for as long as I have been paying attention, unfortunately. And most apps are actually just a bunch of APIs. And in 2021, they tried to split it. So it was web apps and APIs. And then we got #1 and #2 for causes of breach. So that sucks. Malicious actors really know. They know to aim there. And so we must defend there. So let's go through. So I start numbering them at the beginning and then I stopped in hopes that you don't notice that there's more than 10. But anyway, #1, the first thing you need to do is do inventory. We need to know what we're protecting in order to protect it. Inventory is hard. This is a hard problem for our industry, but there are now tools that basically, like if you make API calls, they can find them and they can inventory them for you. And that is great, but you could also just go through your code repository, list all of them, like talk to all of your developers, ask them for all the things that they do. This is called doing an application portfolio exercise. We absolutely have to, like, if we're not doing this continuously, every year we must do this so that we know what we're managing and we know what we're caring for and maintaining. If it is not on our list, it is not getting proper security attention. And then it's not being maintained properly, and then it is not safe and reliable for our users. And so we absolutely must do inventory. And I know this is not the most sexy of activities, but it is basic security hygiene to know what you're protecting. And also, like, this inventory is useful for everyone. All of IT will find this helpful. Okay, #2, all external APIs should only be able to be connected to via an API gateway. Ideally, like if it's up to me, I would also have everything that is behind the firewall connected to with an API gateway. So I love API gateways as much as a person can. I don't own any stock in one, but I should. I'd love to like get involved with one of those companies. I think what they're like the power of a gateway, especially like the more modern ones that have so many features. So like they will do all sorts of rate limiting. So like throttling, resource quotas, like every type of limit that you can imagine, which we'll talk about in the next slide. They can do authentication and first level authorization. So like, who are you? And should you be allowed to call my API or not? They can even do input validation. Like they have so many cool features. They're really amazing. And I should buy stock in one because I just think they're so valuable. And so when you do that, you just stop a crap ton of attacks. Like you just make it so bots can't really get at you in the same way. You just reduce the number of attacks that you're facing by a huge percentage. And so I think a gateway is an absolute must with anything that can be reached from the internet at the very minimum. Like I said in the last slide, throttling and resource quotas and every type of limit that you can possibly set is required for APIs. So nothing should be set to unlimited. The reason for this is that, how do I word this? So bots, in my opinion, are, well, I saw Katie Paxton Fear was speaking at this conference, and I'm like, the most dangerous thing to APIs is, I'm like, well, Katie. But other than specific amazing penetration tester, red team bug hunters like her, bots, there's just way more bots than there are experts like her in the world, right? And bots are the most likely adversary that you are going to face, and you're going to face them over and over and over and over and over again. And if we set limits on every single thing we can, and then we have a gateway, so we're doing authentication and authorization for sure properly, you have just basically made bots pretty much harmless. So throttling, so resource quotas means like you've asked this many times, you're cut off. That is really important so that nothing is unlimited. Throttling is more like a user thing where it'll just slow down. So like you ask and you ask incorrectly a bunch of times, then it's like, cool, you have to wait 5 minutes. Cool, you have to wait 20 minutes. Cool, you have to wait an hour. Cool, you have to wait 24 hours. But there must be a quota where it just stops you. So whenever possible, we want a rate limit and just like cut, like slow them down and cut them off whenever possible, because they will just otherwise just scrape away indefinitely. Like as soon as it'll just like, and they're just trying to brute force their way in. They're causing you bigger cloud bills than you deserve. And bots are terrible. We don't want that. Logging, monitoring, and alerting. So this goes for like every single like app, like web apps, non-web apps, like so logging is just like a long document, a long text document that's just like, this happened, that happened, this happened, that happened. This is evidence. So when I am when I am an incident responder and I am coming in to try to figure out what happened, it is the evidence that I examine. Monitoring is making sure basically like the health of your app in real time, like what is going on. Is my app still up? Is it suffering? Is it going to fall over right now? Observability would be like a bonus on top of this. So observability is like monitoring, except for it detects to see if you're being attacked in real time. Alerting is you sending an alert somewhere, hopefully to someone that's going to get it and read it and do something about it when you think that something bad is happening. I talk about this a lot. I recently recorded something for Wild West Hack and Fest on this, like when errors are actually security incidents, because like this is a real thing. And so you still need to have this for APIs. A lot of people skip it for APIs, and we can't. APIs are the brains of our apps, and they need just as much attention, just as much monitoring, just as much logging as any system. So this is another thing that goes for APIs and web apps. So an API will use more HTTP methods than a web app. So web apps are like get, post all day long usually. But APIs might use delete, they might use update, they might even use like head, maybe. But most of the time they don't use all those. Like maybe they use put, but maybe they don't. So you should disable. So if you're using a virtual machine rather than like a platform as a service, and depending upon your container configuration, like turn those off if you are not using them. Because as I'm sure you heard like all the other super amazing pen tester speakers, like you do a get. So the first thing you do, like you find the APIs, then you do like a get request and you like make sure that you're doing it properly. Then I'm like, cool, now I'm going to do an update, a delete, a post, a this, a that. I'm going to speak dirty to your API all day long, right? And so if you turn those off, those are so many fewer commands that can happen to your API. So just like if you're reduce your attack surface by eliminating that. Service mesh. Service mesh is awesome. Okay, so if you have a microservice architecture with thousands of calls, so not if you have like 6 APIs that get called twice each per day. So you have many APIs being called all the time. Service mesh is really great. It is a layer of infrastructure and you do not have to change your code. And it basically surrounds all of your APIs just like a VPN tunnel, but internally to your network. And what it does is it encrypts end to end and it manages your calls. So it makes sure things arrive that should in a timely manner. If you are having a lot of latency and you're like, what is going on? When are you going to get to me? Or like things are just not arriving, it's probably like you needed a service mesh a long time ago. Service mesh offers security and reliability, and all of that is win. And so if you are doing microservice architectures, I strongly advise either at least checking out to see if you need a service mesh, because we want every request to arrive. Implement standards in your organization and then enforce them. So when I say implementing standards, I mean, so ideally, you're all using the same protocol. You don't have a bunch of people doing SOAP, a bunch of other people doing GraphQL, a bunch of other people are using OpenAPI, because then it's 3 times more work for the security team, right? So if you can get everyone just doing, like, for instance, OpenAI or OpenAPI, if you could just get everyone doing that, then it's less work and you can be more standardized with everything you do. The other thing is like standardize on, we all use this gateway. We all use this mesh. We all write like this. We all do that. We all use this security testing tool. We do this. If you have this standard, and ideally also like secure coding guidance for APIs, because there are other things that you need to worry about. And again, I was only given like 30 minutes, so I can only tell you so much, but there's just so much guidance that I would love to give people. And so we need that in summary. Strict linting. So when I made this slide, I thought that there were many linters for APIs, but it turns out there's just one. So I apologize. I do not own any stock in this company. So they have a freemium tool. So it's an IDE plugin called 42 Crunch. So they make a bunch of things, but it's their IDE plugin. And basically you open up your OpenAPI definition file and it walks you through hardening it. And it only lets you use it so much per month and then you have to pay. But you can certainly try it and then use it on a few, like one API per month. And like once you fix a few things, you're like, oh, I know what to do now. I find it a really great educational tool about like how you could do better. So it like adds input validation, authentication, authorization, all these other things. And so having it help you defend your apps and like harden your API so that it defends itself, like that is pretty cool. Avoid verbose error messages. So the only person that's going to see your error messages are other devs on your team that are working on this or calling your API. So people where you work. Maybe you have customers calling your API. So you'd have their devs, right? Then you'd have your QA and your pen testers. We like all of those people that I have mentioned. All of them are our friends. We want them to have a good experience. So maybe you would send them a document with all of your error codes and what they mean. But the other people that are going to see your reports are the bad guys. And I mean that in a gender neutral way. Bad humans who are malicious actors, threat actors, whatever you want to call them, enemies, who are going to try to do bad things to your API. So when you write an error message, it's really important that you make sure that it doesn't say a bunch of things that it shouldn't. So the first time I did a pen test on an API, I submitted, I was trying to like get my first GET request going. And it's like, oh, sorry, bad format. This is the format you want. And I was like, oh, thanks. That's so helpful. And so then I did a good GET request, right? So then I was like trying to do an injection. And so then I send it my first injection attempt, and it's like, it's crappy, right? My format's not good because I don't know what their code looks like. And it's like, oh, I'm sorry, your format should be like this. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're going to help me craft my attack. And it helped me craft my whole attack. And I've had this happen a bunch of times. And so I remember explaining to the team, and I'm Canadian, and it was a Canadian team that I was working with. And like the stereotypes are true. Like politeness is really important in our society. And so they're like, but we can't be rude. And I'm like, you have to be rude to malicious actors. Like you shouldn't be like, it should be a rude message, but it should just be like error code 431, refer to the sheet. And do not give them a link to the sheet, right? Like as much as possible, we want to give them no information. We want to be useless to these malicious actors. And so please keep that in mind when you're writing error messages. We want to decommission old or unused versions of our APIs. It's extraordinarily important that like we turn off our APIs when we're supposed to. I remember the first time a pen tester explained this to me. They're like, oh yeah, I earned my keep today. And I was like, of course you did. And they're like, yeah, but I'm like, what did you do that was special? And they're like, oh, so I was testing an API and it's version 2 point whatever. So I called out to version 1 and it answered. And it was a mess. And I earned my whole paycheck with that one call. And pen testers have told me since that like every maybe 20 or 30 contracts, they find one that's supposed to be turned off that wasn't. And it's a disaster from a security perspective. And so be very careful when you are supposed to turn it off. So like, let's say you're supposed to have it run for backwards compatibility for 3 months, set a reminder, have a check-in, validate that it is turned off. This is so important. It's so important because software does not age nicely like wine does. It ages like cheese in the hot sun badly. And so please, please, please be very, very careful to decommission when you're supposed to. Lastly, all of the same secure coding practices that apply to any web app apply to an API, except for the front end part. And even still, a lot of the front end stuff, like if your API is just going to be exposed on the front end, like you're just sending stuff that's going to be displayed, then you should output and code it, right? And so we still need to validate inputs. We still need to use parameterized queries. We still need to do all the things that we would normally do with a web app. And I implore you to not forget. So what did we learn today? APIs need just as much security attention as a web app does. This is a minimal set of best practices. Like this is the bare minimum, in my opinion, for securing APIs. And also like a secure system development lifecycle will help ensure that you make a more secure API. So for instance, like threat modeling that API, having security requirements for that API, looking at the overall architecture that it is called in and doing a security review of that, like penetration testing, right? Like all of these things are part of the things that you need to do to make sure any piece of software is secure. So now I want to give you a couple of resources. And I feel like I rushed through my slides because we needed to like recuperate 3 or 4 minutes. So I'm sorry if that was a little bit of a whirlwind and really fast. So some resources. So most of them are free, except my books, basically everything except my books, because books cost money. So the first one is SemGrep Academy. So there is a mini API security course in there, which covers like what I talked about and more, and it is free. Everything in the Academy is free. There's no upsell. Basically, the purpose of the Academy is to try to build trust. And, one day, maybe you'll take the SemGrep course and learn about SemGrep. And then maybe one day when you need a SaaS, you will consider us. That's the whole idea. So you don't pay any money, although we do add you to our newsletter. You can unsubscribe if you need to. But like secure coding, application security courses, functional programming courses, API security, incident response, like there's so many things in there. And I'm hoping to release a new course with my friend Scott Helm any day now. I'm just waiting for him to like look over it and like do final touches. Yes, I think Scott's amazing. My books. So I wrote 2 books, as Christine told you, and the yellow book is the one that she's giving away. She's giving away 20 copies. So if you want to learn about secure coding and building more secure APIs, so there's pages and pages and pages and pages about writing secure APIs. I'm kind of excited about that topic. And then there's like 2/3 of the book is just secure coding advice, like hands-on, like how to do everything. I basically tried to download my entire brain into 415 pages. And then the first book, if you want to learn how to build application security programs, you want to learn how to be an application security professional, that is the book for you. Cyber Mentoring Monday. So every single Monday on Twitter, on Blue Sky, on LinkedIn, and on Mastodon on the InfoSec Exchange server, I use this hashtag to try to pair people with professional mentors. So all of the speakers, you would make great mentors. So if you have done your job for 2 years or more in cybersecurity, you know enough to mentor someone. There's someone who wishes that they could know what you know. And if you want to get into cybersecurity, having a professional mentor, it brings you to the next level. It really does. It's so powerful. I got a professional mentor last year to help me learn to say no, because I was so bad at it. Because I have ADHD and it like makes us very excited to say yes. And also I just love helping people. And so she helped teach me how to very gently and respectfully say no to things that I should, and how to choose what's a no and what's a yes, so that I'm not just exhausted out of my ears all the time. And like, I can't tell you how valuable that just having this person in my court and helping her advise me has been. I've had so many professional mentors. So when you see that I'm so successful, yes, because I have amazing, amazing people helping me and giving me advice. And I have been passing that down to the people that I mentor. And so it's this whole beautiful cycle. So I strongly, strongly suggest considering doing that. TLDR sex. So this is not mine. This is my friend Clint's newsletter, and it's awesome. So I have been subscribing for years. It's been making me look very, very smart for many, many years. And basically, he summarizes the security research every week for many, many articles. And then he just summarizes it so you can read the summary and then decide if you want to double click and read the whole thing. It's free. Pretty cool. Resources me. I am on Blue Sky, GitHub, Mastodon, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, and all of the places. So if you look up SheHacksPurple, that is generally me. And I have YouTube, a blog. I have a newsletter. And this year, I am going to start doing, so if you bought my book, Alice and Bob Learn Secure Coding, it comes with free lessons. So every month, probably starting in May, potentially June, it kind of depends on how my schedule goes and just like when everyone gets their books, because I want to make sure everyone has their books before I start the lessons. 1 per month for 15 months. I'm going to have a bunch of experts on. We're going to stream live onto YouTube for free. All the lessons will be saved for free. We're going to discuss the topics in the chapter. We're going to answer all the questions in the back of the book. And then after, we are going to just answer any questions from the audience until all of you are exhausted. And I did this for the first book. It got a zillion views. And so I want to support you in reading the book. And with that, I want to say, oh, sorry. And you need to join my newsletter to get invited. Yeah, everything's free. The newsletter is free, but it's just so I could tell you when they are. And with that, I want to say thank you so much to this conference for existing, because gosh, I learned a lot sitting through the 2 previous talks. And thank you so much for having me. I don't know if we have 5 minutes for questions or if we're done.
We do. We have a couple minutes. So I just popped one up here.
Awesome. Other question from the defensive view. Is it better to return 404 or 403 when you have no permission to call a resource? Well, I don't really think that the number matters so much. It's only if you're giving a bunch of extra information with it that it's a problem. I tend to not like return raw HTML codes. If I can, I'll give like a generic message and say like permission denied, and that's it, like a custom error message. I'm a big fan of, we create custom error messages with what we want them to know rather than giving them raw responses. So like 404 or 403, not like, I don't think that gives like tons of information versus less information would just be access denied.
Yeah.
What are some good tools for monitoring APIs? I am not an expert on this, to be honest. I don't think I would have really good advice. And I'm tempted to just say Datadog, and I don't want to just say one, but then I just want to say that one. It's also a competitor to SumGraph, so I'm not supposed to tell you that. But we don't do monitoring, but people tend to love Datadog for a reason. That said, like if you do all .NET and all of it's in Azure, like using their monitoring service, just like click, 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 and it's done, right? So I think it really depends on how deep you want to go with your data, how much money you have to spend. And if you want to just monitor, if you also want to do like observability, like detection and responses as well, if I were you, I would work with your security team on this because they might even help you pay for it. And if you are the security team asking this, then I would say you should definitely talk with your developers and talk about how many licenses they want, because they can use this tool too. And also I found that when I talk to the devs, sometimes they already have a tool that I didn't know. Like once I went to go talk to the devs and they had Splunk. I was like, what? You have Splunk? Give me. Anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we don't cover monitoring as much in these, like this one specifically, this conference is about pen testing. So that's why there's not a lot of monitoring coverage, but their big AppySecCon in May will definitely have some monitoring talks and tracks.
Very nice. Well, I will see you then. What do you think about tools that generate Swagger pages automatically from your code like Swashbuckle? Does that address much of the number one inventory problem? So for inventory, like if Swashbuckle automatically generates it from your code, it's like if you have your code, then you know that you have the inventory. Maybe what I should have said on the inventory page is, so I want to know like what APIs you have. I want to know where the code is. I want to have a link to every environment that it is live in. I want to have a link to all the documentation. I want to have contact information for the team, all of that as a minimum, right? So having it generate my Swagger page or my open API definition file, whatever you want to call it, like that is super handy. I also find that like sometimes what it generates is like a bit weak. So do I think that's helpful? Absolutely. Would I want to embellish upon that? Like what it generates? Probably. Do I think it solves the inventory problem? No, personally, I don't think it. Do I think it helps? Yes. But I want more in my inventory than that. That is a great question though.
That is, it's one piece of the puzzle, right? And it can help with that one piece.
Yeah,
well,
it's definitely helpful.
Thank you so much, Tanya.